I'm pleased to welcome you to this artist interview series, which is in conjunction with the exhibition Prison Nation at the Davis Museum at Wellesley College. Prison Nation is organized by the Aperture Foundation in New York. Nicole R. Fleetwood and Michael Famighetti are the curators. Aperture's Prison Nation exhibition was made possible by lead support from the Ford Foundation. Additional generous support was provided by the Reba Judith Sandler Foundation. In today's interview, we will learn more about the work of artist Zora J Murff.
I'm Zora J Murff, artist and educator. I teach at the University of Arkansas School of Art and live here in Fayetteville. So yeah, I mean, I think, like as an artist, I I make artwork from like a standpoint of social concern. And I use like photography as a way to like investigate various social phenomena. But like a big part of that is like always trying to reflect back on how photography and like the use of the camera informs these phenomena, like sort of gets subsumed by them. So I've made, just like a broad array of work, for this exhibition, the work corrections, looking at the experiences of kids in the juvenile criminal justice system, specifically in Eastern Iowa. And at the time, making that work, being a social worker.
So I'm Lynne Sullivan. I am the regional manager for the Petey Greene Program in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And I've been a part of this program for 4 years. And what brings me into the Petey Greene Program is my personal experience and my passion for education. I am formerly incarcerated. I spent a significant amount of time in the prison systems. And it was where I began my educational journey, was while I was incarcerated, and completed it again when I came out for my master's degree. So it's been an interesting journey, but a very good journey. And right now I have the best job in the world, is where I get to bring education and support academic learning within the prison systems again, and with people coming home. So. I'm
so excited to be here with you guys. You are both such inspirational figures. I'm Ana Luisa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior at Wellesley College, double majoring in political science and gender studies. I'm a Ministry Fellow on the Metro West team. So most of the volunteer programs that my team runs and coordinates have to do with unhoused, incarcerated, and formerly incarcerated communities.
Well, Lynne and Ana Luisa actually both requested to view the same artwork with you, Zora. Both are particularly interested in Jaleel at 15 from 2015.
This photo I felt like was, I don't know, particularly impactful for me when I first saw it. So I would love to hear from you, Zora, about kind of how you dealt with the fact of having to keep these photos anonymous, because I know that you weren't allowed to show anyone's face, partly because they're juveniles. Yeah, and I would love to hear from you kind of how you navigated your relationships, your goals as an artist and a photographer within kind of those legal parameters of having to keep the photos anonymous, as we see you did so brilliantly here.
Yeah, absolutely. So like specifically in the context of like the work, I had to keep the kids anonymous. I was working with kids who were like in the community incarceration programs. So, from ankle monitoring services to just, kind of drop-in supervision, like where you have to check on them so many like times a week, working on specific goals with them. So, I think that, that raised a lot of like, because I was employed there, because, you're working with, like having to leave their identities concealed, that I had to ask myself a lot of questions as the practitioner, right? The person making the image, about, sort of what do I need to be doing to do this in a responsible way? But I think more largely it connects to the practice of photography. And, like often, we're hearing a lot of language and rhetoric that like, photography is like a tool for colonization. It does all these bad things, has been used to make and uphold stereotypes of people. But, those things are true, but photography is just a technology. It's an object, it's a machine, it works in a particular way to produce a particular result. When people start using the technology, that's where we have a lot of problems, right? So it can be used to do good things, it can be used to do bad things. And so there's like, as a practitioner, as an artist, really, there's no code of ethics, right? Maybe like for photojournalism, there are like ethics, but there's like no code of ethics. And what I mean by that is like, no one comes to you and says, you can only photograph these specific things in this specific way. There's no kind of ethics to it. Ethics to it, like as a broader system, but then as an individual, like you have to sort of decide what you're willing to do, like and sort of what's morally right or wrong, right? And so I had to contend with that a lot with making the portraits of the kids. And when I started the project, typically when we would start the portrait session, I would be making portraits of them like that was just a normal portrait. You could see their face, and I would look at those sometimes. I never showed them to anybody, but I would look at them for myself sometimes, and I would just be so torn because they would be really compelling photographs, but again, like what responsibilities do I have if I'm choosing to make this work? And so that just required me to then sort of use my imagination when it came to making the images, and then also having a lot of discussions with the kids about how they felt they wanted to be seen. And so trying to find ways of working together to to create an image that we could both sort of agree upon, right? And so this image in particular, this my office was at the detention center, but I didn't work in the detention center. But I would often, talk with kids who were there. Like some of the kids I worked with out in the community, would get reincarcerated. So then, but anyway, I my office was there, I interacted with kids there. And so sometimes I would make portraits in the facility to tell that part of the story. And so, this young man, we were in the housing unit, in his housing unit. And so it's an enclosed area. It has a living space, and then they each have a room. There's I think 5 or 6 rooms in one housing unit. And so this is inside of his room. And trying to negotiate space, but then also I don't know, I guess here playing with the tightness of the space, because it's a hard space to photograph in because it's not very big. And so then using the mirror as a way to present him, but then also doing that thing of sort of reflecting outward. So thinking about me being there with the camera, but then if a viewer is looking at this, they're thinking about this, this action of standing in front of a mirror and seeing a reflection, right? So those are things that I guess I was considering when making the photograph, and with sort of approaching the project generally.
I feel like this photo really conveys some sense of who this person is and their experience and their emotions. The fact that you talked with them, I feel like comes through in the art.
I found this photo very empowering with me as far as I had to find a way to detach from this photo in some ways, because for me, it can bring back memories of being able to sit in a cell like that. And that is your only mirror. That is the only way that you view yourself, is through this mirror that really isn't a mirror at all. But you're sitting in there looking at concrete walls, and that's what they are. So it's like a lost soul sitting in a box, staring at a concrete wall where people can observe you, watch you, judge you, and dictate where your life is going. So I see so much in this because of my history and the history of people that I know and love, that I see past just seeing a boy sitting there. I see many, many children sitting there, and young adults. And I had the experience of watching many of them come in at 17 into the prison system itself. So it's a very powerful statement you're making in this picture, in my estimate.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate, Lynn, how you're talking about like sort of the depth of connection based on one's lived experience and like what one can draw from that. And I feel like, you know, that was again something that I often contended with making the work, was that, you know, I'm telling other people's stories. You know, these are experiences that aren't mine, experiences that you know, that I didn't have. And so you know, trying to like do my best to find, you know, like the use of aesthetics to be able to prompt those, like being able like to ask those questions, right? So someone who has never been incarcerated or doesn't know someone who's incarcerated, right? Like you know, the line of the mirror, of course, like the sort of double reflection that the camera is looking at the wall, but then you see the wall again repeated, how he's turned towards the wall, right? Like all of those things can prompt exactly like the experiences you're saying you're feeling or sort of drawn up. But they don't have to, like, they don't have to have lived that experience. And so then for me, the reason I feel I like when I was engaged in this work in particular, it was like this mode of education. I educated myself like so much because photography is so deeply rooted in, you know, the criminal justice system, just through the idea of surveillance, right? And so I learned so much about what I was doing, and really like kind of set off some alarms in my head, like, hey man, do you really want to participate in this system? You know, like, of course, like I loved my job because I know interpersonally, like I was there to do good, and I was there trying to like just be like some sort of influence, some sort of positive influence in these kids' lives in whatever way I could, right? Even if that was like, hey man, I stayed out too late, can I get a ride home? Of course, yeah, I'll come pick you up, and then I'll, you know, talk to you on the way home about making better choices, right? But yeah, like that, even though I had those intentions, that you're still a part of this system of oppression. And so like, you know, that was a way like that I was able to liberate myself from that, like through that education. And then my hope, you know, as an artist is that like, again, through like looking and engaging with the content, that people can, you know, maybe start to open their eyes to some things and liberate themselves, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing all that with me. I mean, I find your artwork both in a manner where it touches the core of the person, but also where it can educate someone who has never experienced incarceration. And especially with youth. The Petey Greene Program here in Massachusetts has expanded into the youth facilities here in Massachusetts. And we've actually gotten in where we're expanding. We're hoping over the next year and a half, we can hit all over. They have over 50 of them in Massachusetts youth programs. And we want to be able to support them in education and give them that extra support in humanity.
Ana Luisa, would you like to pose a question to Lynn as well?
As a college student, I have volunteered at MCI Framingham, met some really, really wonderful women I was at SMCC, which is the pre-release facility. Yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. I met some really lovely people. Yeah, I just thinking about like being a college student at like a quote unquote elite institution, predominantly white institution. My team structures a lot of volunteer programs that engage with communities who are historically, systematically, institutionally like disenfranchised. And I would just love to hear from you how you go about structuring the programs at Petey Greene to be, educational for everybody involved, and how you kind of navigate the power dynamics, especially when you're engaging with, college students who are maybe entering youth facilities, like you said, and how you just, go about making that like an intentional space for mutual learning and growth.
Thank you so much for those questions and for your volunteering services. That's amazing. Framingham has some wonderful people in it. It was really sad when they closed down South Middlesex, and the discussions over Framingham. We're hoping to get back in there fairly soon. Education is starting up again. So hopefully we'll be able to get back in there. As far as supporting programs, and supporting our volunteers, it's so important for us to make sure that you're all prepared for tutoring. So one of the key things for us is to make sure that you're all prepared to go in and tutor. As far as hitting and stepping outside of privilege, the majority of the Boston colleges are all privileged. Most of the universities that we're out of, which has been sort of somewhere where we've had to really try to figure out how we're going to change the system here. How can we make it work so I can work I need community students. I want people that are in community colleges to have the same opportunity. And we find that's really challenging because they're not just going to school. They're taking care of families. They're working one job, maybe two jobs, just to get through those programs. So to try to reach them more, I've been because we're reaching out to Western Mass a lot right now, some of our partnerships in Western Mass with the youth facilities. And it's key to work with some of those colleges that they have out there as well. So now I'm in conversation where we want co-curriculum classes, programs with professors where these folks can actually gain credit to be able to volunteer during that class time. Instead of being in the class, be able to go out and volunteer. We've also been talking with a lot of folks where I'm bringing a lot of work study programs. So that way they can be paid and being able to have that opportunity to be a volunteer coordinator and have these experiences. And these are life-changing experiences. We have our volunteers going into these systems that are so unjust in every way you can possibly think of, between educational opportunities that are lacking, treating people as human beings, and we can go down an entire list on that whole atmosphere, but we won't go down that road right now. But we try to make sure that we can have everyone have that bird's eye view. That's what we give you. We give you that bird's eye view of all these injustices that are happening in our carceral systems. And then with that insight, we want to give you the educations that go with it. So we get that experience. So you get to feel what it's like, see what it's doing firsthand, see the amazing work it does just having that support system and building that relationship with your students inside or coming home and watching those transformations take place. But the hope that you bring is far more than academic learning. You bring hope, belief in themselves, which you're bringing because you show you care. Some folks have never had anybody care about them. We have youth that's never even experienced the word I care or I believe in you. So to have someone sit down and say, hey, I believe in you. I'm going to be here every week because I believe in you. And we're going to do this together is transforming and changing. And at the same time, you're getting that experience on the inside. We're bringing you in where we have our justice education webinars, where we want to continue that education. We want you to keep learning. So we have those twice in a semester, and all of our volunteers are required. We have tutor development trainings to give you different strategies and skills. And the whole point is we want you to reimagine these justice systems, these injustice systems rather, and change them and reimagine how we can go about them. And as far as being able to reach more people, we're doing everything we can to work with professors and colleges and other programs, so everyone has access to this kind of volunteer work, not just the privileged.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. I feel like, yeah, these are questions that I ask every day as we're trying to navigate our volunteer programs.
Zora, if you don't mind me asking, what was the underlining thought process or emotion that made you want to highlight the youths?
I think it was like, I think it was like a lot of different things that just kind of all worked together. Like, I wasn't going to be an artist. I was planning on being like a counseling psychologist. And so I have a psychology degree, and then was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And then, but I worked, jobs in social services. And so I just ended up kind of, by like randomly just taking this job, working with kids on probation without really understanding what I was getting myself into. But at the same time, I started practicing photography, and so, the deeper I got into learning about art, I was just like, you're expected to make work. And then I was like working full-time student. And I was like, well, I'm just going to bring the two of these things together because it's really all I can do. But I thought it could just be an interesting, sort of story to tell. And I when I started the project, it was like mainly just the portraits. And I think that was because that's like a majority of the job is interacting with the kids. And so it's like, I can't tell this story about juvenile incarceration without focusing on them. But yeah, I don't know, like a lot of it just sort of went hand in hand. I had to learn how to develop, trust with the kids really quickly, because I'm tasked with stepping in like and doing like crisis intervention. That's like a majority of the job, is like to make sure that the kids don't get in more trouble, like in situations like where the police get called, like if they're acting out at home and the parents just get so frustrated they just call the cops. Instead they call me, and then I have to be able to de-escalate things, right? And so I feel like by just like, I think I just let my experiences lead the way that I was making the work. And that felt like the most genuine thing to do, and like the most, I think, careful way of working. Because I feel like it could have been really easy to just like sort of like fetishize, like this quote unquote experience, right? And really, like, because I remember talking with like my supervisor early on about wanting to make the work, and then she was like trying to understand like what it like meant to like make art about this, this environment. And like she kept like throwing out picture ideas. She's like, oh yeah, like if like someone was like in handcuffs, or like just sort of what came to mind for her were like maybe like sort of true crime type images. And I think like I could have done that, right? But it like, I knew like once I started making those portraits that like I had to be careful. And then so just letting kind of real life experiences lead our interactions, and making sure like, yeah, like having really deep conversations with the kids about like wanting to make an image of them, but then trying to explain like, I can't show your face for these reasons, but then that also creates this interesting, I think, like aesthetic experience where it like, where their face isn't like erased from the image, and somehow like the viewer might be able to empathize even though they can't look somebody in the face. Like trying to explain things like that to them so they understood like what the images were supposed to be about, rather than me just taking something from them, right? Yeah, I hope that answers what you're asking.
Yes, it does. It does very much. Thank you very much. I would find it really difficult to be able to not only have those images, but to learn and grow so close. And I would find it really hard to detach my personal emotions.
Well, yeah,
I have that problem right now sometimes when I'm working with the youth systems now. It's like, they're like, hey, do you want to expand? I'm like, of course, let's just do it. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, have you figured out how you're going to do it? I'll just figure it out. And I do, but it's hard to detach that emotions because I've been involved with the system, most of my life. I've had the child care system, DYS system, DCF at the time when I was younger. I have a son now who was going through that system, and now he's with me. So it's like, wow. And it's hard to detach sometimes because they go through so many traumas and so much throughout their lives that we just wish we could turn the clocks for them and try to bring it over again for them, but we can't. So it's like, how do you detach when you see so much vulnerability in those photos and so of that person?
Well, I think that was like this, like again, pointing towards like the ethics of it. I would, I might talk with the kids about like the project and the process like during work hours, but I would never photograph during work hours, right? And like so I would show up, off the clock, sort of, and I think that's like something with social work that it is hard to find those lines because you are working with people, right? But I remember at one point like in a training, someone said like we're supposed to be like a professional friend, and I was like, what is that? Like, I don't understand that language.
I learned that one when I was trying to do drug counseling. It was like, don't share your own personal story. Excuse me? How am I supposed to empathize and compare, understand?
Right. Yeah, so like I think having to like find ways of making these delineations so things felt like kind of ethically safe, like I was doing this again, like sort of in a responsible way. It really, I think it's helped me like understand like when and where to detach, but then how also the process of sharing like like that this is my passion, like when I clock out, like I make art and this is like what I do for fun, and like that the kids get to see that part, like that side of me, right? It personalizes, like it makes me more of a human being and less of a consequence, right? Which then like reinforced that trust that I was talking about. So then it actually ended up making our relationships deeper and stronger. And like, like when I look at these images, like I see like us, like, like I see moments that I had with them, it just reminds me of that time in my life. And, like how special they really were to me because they all helped me grow as a person. I was like in my like early to mid 20s, when I was making this work. And I think that's like, it's such an intense, like formative time. But to be going through that experience, like, working with these kids, like they taught me a lot of things about the world that I, like did never really give much attention to,
Many thanks to each of you for sharing these moving and challenging insights with us today. I encourage everyone watching to visit the Davis to see this important exhibition, which will be on view until June 5th, 2022.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.